Narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, may Allah be pleased with him. Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, "A time will come when the best property of a Muslim will be sheep, which he will take on the top of mountains and the places of rainfall valleys, so as to flee with his religion from al-fitan, trials and afflictions, etc." Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So this is one of my favorite hadiths that I often mention, especially when I am making a argument against materialism. And what's helpful about this is that it humbles us, because a lot of people think that they've made it in life because they live in a very luxurious part of town, and some people feel very lowly because they're in a more rural, more raw existence. And yet we see here that we are told the best property of a Muslim will be sheep. Now, what's fascinating about sheep? Now, I'm not sure if the Arabic word is just like livestock or, cattle, goats, lambs and whatnot. But let's take a minute and see sheep here, since the translator, Muhsin Khan, wrote the word sheep. Now, sheep, what do you get from them? You shear them, you get their hair, wool, to make sweaters, blankets. You can get a lot from them. And they are a very docile creature. You can get milk from them as well, and their milk is delicious, and you can make lots of dairy products. And you can also use their pelts to make your house nice. And you can also use their skin to make leather, make all kinds of stuff. And obviously the bone marrow is delicious to eat from sheep as well. So no matter which way you look at it, you get a lot from that animal. And it's really beneficial for us to see how wonderful sheep are. Easy to take care of. They're kind of dumb. Now goats, they're like hit you in the kneecap. They got a little bit more attitude, which is kind of funny. Llamas spit on you. Camels are kind of tall. There's pros and cons to every breed. And with cows, you need a lot of water. And the cows, they're going to do what they want to do. And a bull, trying to take care of a bull is tough work, especially if two bulls don't like each other. And sheep, they're just really pleasant, and when you go to shear them, they just kind of let you do it. They get a haircut. They get trained over time. So, all the wonderful things you get from them and how docile they are a great combo. So, thinking of sheep as a good investment also makes us realize that a man who has to work with animals is quite valuable, and a man who knows how to handle animals as well, because you have to have a certain temperament in order to deal with animals, and patience, because sometimes sheep are really dumb and they're gonna get in trouble, and that's why you have to have your staff and your dog to help you, and you are always observing them, making sure they're okay and stuff like that. So if you notice how many prophets, may Allah be pleased with them, all worked around animals or have iconography with animals, it starts to make sense. Now, the mountains, nature, it doesn't say cityscapes, where tall skyscrapers, where the only food you have is from the grocery store. As soon as that runs out, that's it for you. As in films like The Walking Dead, we saw how that worked in pretty much every zombie movie, right? We see how people in the cities, it's all roaming gangs of who gets the resources, and whoever has the most weapons and bodies pretty much is going to dominate the food supplies. And cities, when the economies are up and about, have value, but in the raw reality, when we have our modern infrastructure return back to its primal state, we see that the mountains, the lakes, the oceans that remains as a prime resource. And where the rainfall valleys go, so we see where you could grow crops. And the cities are becoming more and more oppressive and highly expensive. And some people feel bad, like, hey, I can't afford to live in the city, so I must be a loser or something. Or they think that they have a right to live in the city. I know that sounds kind of weird, but when you think about New York City, for example, some very small apartments, it's almost like a prison cell size if you really look at it. $3,000 a month. No balcony, nowhere to grow anything. Your poor children are going to be stuck inside on tablets. It's like a beehive. And we're not really meant to live like that. If you think about how people in the past had tents, teepees, huts, with your fellow villagers on a flat plain. Some natives built more closer to the canyon and whatnot. And you can realize suddenly, like, hey, being stacked on top of each other versus having a little bit of space from your neighbors does a body good. I remember in Philadelphia how the houses were. The condos, the complexes, you know, either it's a home or they turn it into a duplex, but either way, the buildings are all linked up. There's no gaps between many of them, and there's no front and backyard, and there's no trees. And noise from your neighbors is hard. And when you have children, you know, you can't help but, you know, feel bad when your kids make a lot of noise. So you have to do your best. And when you have a little bit of space, it does you well peace-wise. And so valleys in a lush rainfall area where you can grow crops and you can have sheep graze and you're away from the city, that's really blissful. You just have to find a way to pay your property taxes. See, that's what's kind of really sad about the modern system in America is you never really own anything, and the government and corporations are always looking for a way to impoverish you. They don't really want you to be in the landowning class. They always want you to either you pay them perpetually or they steal your land. And excessive taxation on a property you already paid off and you paid it with even despite the high interest loans, that's pretty brutal. So it's hard to be a farmer in some places, but look at the countries like Afghanistan, Yemen, Ethiopia. Just look around the world, Malaysia. There are spots where a Muslim can have that kind of ranch. And sure, there will be first world people who will be like, oh, you know, you're not in Miami, you're not in Las Vegas, you're this, you're that, or you're not in Tokyo, Japan. But if you take a step back and think about this hadith, you realize that when the economies collapse, the city people branch out into the rural areas because they have to look for food. And it makes me think about when Rick and Lori, in the beginning of The Walking Dead Season 1, how they showed up on Herschel's farm and realized, like, hey, he's got livestock. They just didn't create a good perimeter, and you know, he had a bunch of walkers in the barn, which was stupid. But overall, the message was, hey, we got this space, and we need to utilize it. Being in the city where there's no land to grow anything, I mean, having a couple potted plants on your tiny balcony is not going to, you know, sustain you over time. It can be a little bonus, but it's not supplementary. So, you know, having a place where the rain falls also helps you not worry too much about irrigation and stuff like that. Modern sprinkler systems, those are a modern invention, and maintaining those and building those won't always last. And not everyone knows how to fix a sprinkler system when they fail. So if you have a place where it naturally has a climate area that can produce a good crop rotation through the seasons, you can do pretty well. And if it's a snowy area, sheep, a good mutton stew in the winter is nice. And their wool is going to keep you warm. People forget oftentimes, which I don't blame them for forgetting, but modern heating systems, if your electrical grid goes down, you don't have trees that much around to have a consistent fireplace, nor do you even have a fireplace. If you got a nice fluffy sheep, you can shear them, you can learn to tan. I've seen women spin wool and make blankets and stuff. You'll have to learn that skill again. It's not a lost art, but think about how that sheep's wool would be able to keep you warm, and you would shear them during the summer so that they can regrow their hair by the winter, and then you're prepping your winter products during the summer season. So it's fascinating, the whole connection we have to nature, animals, and our habitat, really, when you think about it. So this hadith is one of my favorites, because when you have someone like Andrew Tate, who's hyper materialistic, or people wanting to be like the Kardashians, or snobby people from America who think that they're better than people in the third world, like Matt Walsh. "We shouldn't be the world soup kitchen," he wrote once on his X profile. I mean, it's amazing how when you read the Bible and it talks about the poor, and there always will be poor, and that you should help them and don't look down on them, that you'll have wealthy Zio Christians who are like, yeah, we're better than those Christians from the third world. But I digress. The point is, if you're ever feeling down, just remember this hadith, because status comes and goes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took down Fir'aun and his entire empire. And if you think about the earth, it's filled with ruins of past civilizations. And so, having some sheep and living in the mountains, it's not so bad. I know it can be boring because we're so used to PlayStations and whatnot. But imagine you had a little signal, a little distance from people, but you're still close enough to a hospital in case of some medical need. I think you won at life. Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe, share. Join the blog.